The movement itself didn't just stand out. It contradicted everything we thought we knew. On March 14th, open-source satellite trackers spotted a ship moving at speed through the South China Sea. Not a carrier, not a destroyer. An amphibious assault ship, USS Tripoli, LHA-7. A platform many defense analysts had already written off as a failed experiment. But this one wasn't empty. On her deck sat up to 20 F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters. Inside her hull, 2,500 Marines. And her destination was Hormuz. That's where the logic breaks, at least on the surface. Because by any normal measure, the United States has already shattered most of Iran's military equation. Roughly 90% of it is broken. 60 warships now rest on the bottom of the Gulf. Missile factories that once gave Hormuz its bite are rubble. Drone production lines have gone quiet. 2 carrier strike groups are already holding the perimeter from opposite directions. Lincoln controls the Arabian Sea. Ford holds the Red Sea. A third carrier, Bush, is still crossing the Atlantic and is only days out. From a distance, the siege looks complete, and yet Hormuz is still shut. So what does complete really mean when you stop looking at maps and start looking at math? More than 150 tankers remain anchored outside the strait, burning money every hour they sit and wait. Brent crude stays above $100 a barrel because markets do not price optimism, they price certainty. And right now, certainty does not exist. Because the remaining 10% of Iran's capability, mines laid across the seabed, mobile launchers hidden in mountain tunnels, fast attack craft staged in coastal coves, is still enough to deny a 6 nautical mile shipping lane. That is the arithmetic that keeps every escort commander awake. You do not need to destroy an entire convoy to close a strait. You need to sink one tanker, one burning hull in that corridor, and the next insurance policy never gets written. The strait does not close because of raw force, it closes because of fear. And fear only needs one example. That is the paradox at the center of this war. The strongest navy ever assembled solved 90% of the problem, but escort demands 100, and the distance between 90 and 100 can be measured in one supertanker on fire. So why is the Pentagon sending a ship that so many analysts wrote off to solve what 2 supercarriers could not? What can 2,500 Marines do that 50,000 sailors cannot? If you respect the men and women operating these machines, subscribe to Navy Decoded. We do not sell headlines, we solve equations. And to understand this equation, you have to understand the ship. Because Tripoli is not just another hull. It is a ship America built, criticized, and nearly discarded. The reason it was called a mistake is also the reason it may now be exactly what this crisis requires. When the Navy designed the America-class Flight Zero ships, it made a choice that triggered backlash from Congress, Marine Corps generals, and defense analysts all at once. It deleted the well deck entirely. The well deck is the ballast-flooded chamber in the lower part of an amphibious ship. Every assault ship since World War II had one. It is how LCAC hovercraft launch. It is how landing craft deploy. It is one of the defining features of an amphibious warship. Building an amphib without a well deck is like designing a pickup truck and forgetting the cargo bed. The backlash was severe enough that Congress forced the Navy to reverse course. The well deck was restored on the third hull, USS Bougainville, LHA-8. But the first 2 ships, America LHA-6 and Tripoli LHA-7, were left with the original design. They were written off as failed experiments, amphibious ships that had forgotten how to be amphibious. The defense press broadly agreed the ship was called a mistake, but the Navy saw something the critics did not. By removing the well deck, it freed up enormous internal volume. That space became a larger hangar bay, expanded aviation maintenance facilities, a fully equipped surgical hospital, and fuel storage that older amphibious designs could never match. Tripoli did not lose the ability to put Marines ashore. It changed the method, from the sea surface to the air. And in exchange, it gained something no other amphibious warship on Earth can match. The ability to operate 20 F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters at the same time. That was demonstrated off the California coast in April 2022. 16 aircraft from Marine Aircraft Group 13 and 4 from VMX-1 operated from her deck in a single surge evolution. 20 F-35Bs. nearly half the air wing of a $13 billion supercarrier, operating from a ship that costs about $3.5 billion. The platform critics mocked as a failed idea turned out to be one of the most dangerous pocket carriers on the water. And that is exactly why it makes sense for Hormuz. We explained in a previous video why supercarriers refuse to enter the Persian Gulf. It is a 540 nautical mile bathtub that Iran has spent 40 years converting into a killbox. You do not push 100,000 tons of irreplaceable steel into that environment unless there is no other option. Tripoli displaces around 44,000 tons. She is valuable, but she is not irreplaceable the way Ford or Lincoln are. In Pentagon risk calculations, losing Tripoli would be painful. Losing a carrier would be catastrophic. That changes what commanders are willing to do with her. Tripoli is expendable enough to get closer and strong enough to matter when she does. And she carries something no carrier can replicate: 2,500 Marines spread across 5 ships. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit out of Okinawa, the only continuously forward-deployed MEU in the world. Just before this crisis escalated, they completed Exercise Iron Fist 26 with the Japanese Self-Defense Force, rehearsing island seizure, electronic warfare, and rapid amphibious assault from February 23rd through March 9th. 2 weeks later, Hormuz called. Tripoli's escort included the Aegis cruiser Robert Smalls, CG-62, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer Rafael Peralta, DDG-115, and 2 San Antonio-class LPDs, New Orleans and San Diego, carrying the Marines and their equipment. That redeployment has a cost. Pulling Tripoli out of Japan strips the Indo-Pacific of its only amphibious rapid reaction force. That is not a small move. The Pentagon is shifting assets out of one theater to stabilize another. And that tells you exactly how important Hormuz is right now. So the ship once dismissed as a mistake is racing through the South China Sea toward the narrowest strait on Earth. And what it brings to Hormuz is not simply more missiles, it brings a new dimension: ground presence. Iran prepared beach defenses to stop landing craft approaching from the sea. Tripoli does not need landing craft. Her Marines arrive from above. No one outside classified channels knows exactly how CENTCOM intends to use Tripoli, and any channel claiming certainty is guessing. But the ship's capabilities are not classified, and those capabilities introduce 3 options Hormuz did not have before she sailed. Each one addresses a different part of the 10% problem the carriers left behind. Start with the air problem. Lincoln and Ford are operating outside the Persian Gulf in open water because they are too valuable to risk inside the bathtub. That means there is no persistent air cover living directly over the strait. A combat air patrol launching from Lincoln at 500 nautical miles must fly more than an hour just to reach the shipping lanes. Once it gets there, on-station time is measured in minutes before fuel forces it to turn back. That gap, the space between launch and actual presence, is where Iranian drones find tankers. Tripoli changes that with distance. At 44,000 tons and $3.5 billion, she is close enough to operate near Hormuz in ways the carriers cannot. Her F-35Bs are STOVL aircraft, short takeoff, vertical landing. No catapults required. They launch from an 844-foot deck, and operating at 100 nautical miles instead of 500 changes the most important variable in the fight: time on station. Run the math. An F-35B leaving Lincoln from 500 nautical miles away cruises at roughly 450 knots. That means over an hour of transit each way. Roughly 2 hours of fuel burned just traveling to the patrol box and back. On a standard load, that leaves maybe 40 minutes of actual patrol over the shipping lanes. Even at 3 sorties a day per jet, you still end up with coverage gaps measured in hours. Now run those same numbers from Tripoli at 100 nautical miles. Transit time drops to about 13 minutes each way. Time on station effectively triples. The gap between patrols falls from hours to minutes. And those minutes are the difference between an Iranian Mohijer 6 finding a tanker first, or an F-35B finding the drone first. Tripoli's passive sensors can detect surveillance drones before those drones pass targeting coordinates back to shore-based launchers. Kill the drone and you break the kill chain. We explained that chain in the previous video. Tripoli is the tool that breaks it near the source. But the sky is only one layer of the problem. The strait has 3 dimensions, and 2 of them still favor Iran. 3 fortified islands sit directly inside the shipping corridor, and no amount of air patrol alone can erase a missile launcher buried in reinforced concrete. Iran controls Abu Musa, Greater Tunb, and Lesser Tunb, seized in 1971 and heavily fortified since. Anti-ship missile batteries, coastal radar, artillery, and IRGC garrisons are all positioned there. These islands function like unsinkable aircraft carriers. Fixed launch platforms sitting at point-blank range from the corridor. Even after Epic Fury's air campaign, any surviving capability on those islands is still a threat to every ship passing through. This is precisely the kind of target set Tripoli was built to deal with. And this is where the absence of the well deck becomes a strength rather than a weakness. A traditional amphibious ship would have to push landing craft through mined waters to reach those islands. Tripoli does not. Her Marines insert by vertical envelopment, MV-22 Ospreys and CH-53 helicopters, not landing craft. They fly over the minefields instead of trying to sail through them. They never have to touch the water Iran spent decades preparing to deny. Strike teams can hit missile batteries and radar sites, take whatever intelligence they can carry, and pull back to the ship before local defenders can organize a counterattack. No permanent occupation, just a threat that no longer fires into the shipping lane. There is precedent for this. Operation Praying Mantis in 1988 saw Marines from USS Tripoli board and destroy Iranian oil platforms in the Persian Gulf in a single day. The 31st MEU trains specifically for operations like that. But the caveat matters. Assaulting a fortified island is dangerous. After 2 weeks of airstrikes, no one knows the exact state of Iranian defenses on those islands. This may be the lowest probability scenario. It is also the highest impact one. And the fact that it now exists forces Iran to react. Every IRGC fighter assigned to defend an island is one less defending the coast. Raids solve the island problem, but Hormuz is not only islands, it is also 6 nautical miles of open water where no warship wants to linger. That leads to the larger question. How do you control a corridor without putting ships inside it? The answer may be Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, EABO, the central concept behind the Marine Corps' Force Design 2030 overhaul, the biggest marine restructuring since World War II. It has never been tested in combat. Hormuz could become the first real proof. The concept is simple in theory. Marines insert onto small islands, uninhabited coastline, or allied territory in Oman or the UAE. They set up temporary operating bases with HIMARS launchers, radar arrays, and forward arming and refueling points where F-35Bs and Ospreys can land, rearm, and relaunch without returning to the ship. What that creates is a kill zone spanning the full width of the strait. HIMARS firing ATACMS at 162 nautical miles or PRSM at 270 nautical miles can hit fast attack craft, submarines, or mine-laying vessels entering the corridor. It is anti-ship firepower launched from shore. At the same time, Marines can screen the LCS mine countermeasure ships already operating in the area, small boats defending against fast boat harassment with F-35Bs above them creating a protective umbrella. Mine clearance still takes time. That does not change. But Tripoli can compress the timeline by protecting the sweepers while the work is happening instead of waiting for all mine clearance to finish before escort operations begin. That changes the physics of controlling the strait. You no longer need major warships sitting inside the corridor to dominate it. Marines ashore can create a firepower bubble that is cheaper, harder to locate, and impossible to sink. And this is not purely theoretical. HIMARS already struck Iranian warships during Epic Fury from positions in Bahrain. The 31st MEU just rehearsed similar concepts during Exercise Iron Fist 26. The caveat again, EABO is new and this scale remains unproven. Sustaining forward bases under Iranian counterfire is a real logistical question. But the underlying physics are already proven. HIMARS can reach the targets. The doctrine may be new, the weapon is not. Taken separately, each of these scenarios solves only part of the problem. Taken together, they produce something Iran has never had to counter. That is the real significance of Tripoli. This is not about pouring more firepower into a problem that firepower has already failed to finish. It is about adding an operational dimension that was absent from this theater until Tripoli sailed. For 40 years, Iran prepared for threats from the sea, American warships on the horizon. It built the equation around that assumption. Mines under the waterline, cruise missiles along the coast, fast attack craft swarming in the shallows. Every budget decision, every doctrine, every fortification was built around making the Gulf too dangerous for ships. The first phase of Epic Fury added a threat from the air. Carrier aircraft smashed air defenses, flattened factories, and crippled infrastructure. But aircraft sortie in and sortie out. They do not stay. Tripoli adds the ground. Marines can appear on islands, on coastlines, on Allied positions along the strait, and Marines persist. That is the variable Iran never truly built for. Iran prepared coastal defenses against ships entering the strait, mines, shore missiles, swarm craft. Iran built air defenses against bombers and strike aircraft coming from above. Those systems are now damaged or silent. Iran built beach defenses to stop landing forces arriving from the sea. Tripoli skips the beach. Her Marines come from the sky. Now look at the problem from Tehran's perspective. Defend the islands against Marine raids, and the coastline becomes vulnerable to EABO. Fortify the coastline, and the islands become exposed. Spread forces across everything, and none of those positions is strong enough to stop a concentrated strike. 3 choices, 3 bad answers. There is no correct solution because Iran built defenses for ships and aircraft, not for Marines arriving by helicopter onto ground that was never supposed to be contested. That variable did not exist in the original coastal defense equation, and Iran does not have months to invent a response, not with factories destroyed and air defenses suppressed. Be clear about what this does not mean. It does not mean Hormuz opens tomorrow. Mine clearing still takes time. Escort still carries danger. But Tripoli can move the timeline from months toward weeks. And more importantly, it moves the initiative. Before Tripoli, the strategy was to wait, grind Iran down under a naval siege while oil markets bled. After Tripoli, the strategy becomes active. Solve the problem from multiple dimensions at once. The next equation is already being built. So return to the paradox we started with, the 10% problem that 2 supercarriers could not solve. The carriers solved 90%. By any standard in military history, that is extraordinary. But Hormuz does not grade on effort. Hormuz runs on certainty, and 90% is not 100%. 1 mine, 1 missile, 1 tanker burning in the lane. That is all it takes to keep insurers out and shipping frozen. So the Navy did not solve the last 10% by forcing more ships into the corridor. It sent a force built to operate where ships cannot, on islands, along coastlines, in the air over the strait, and at ranges no carrier can sustain continuously. The Navy refused to send the carriers into Hormuz. So it sent the Marines, not to invade Iran, not to occupy it, to close the gap between 90 and 100 by solving the equation from dimensions Iran never fully defended against. Iran spent 40 years perfecting the equation for ships, and in that sense, it succeeded. Mines, missiles, swarms, tunnels, every defense aligned to one variable, American steel on the waterline. They solved the equation correctly, but for the wrong variable. Carriers impose siege from the outside, Marines solve from the inside. And the ship they once called a mistake may turn out to be the answer no one expected.